Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be back here in Hong Kong, the gateway to China, in a time of extraordinary, exceptional, unbelievable change. Just so I can calibrate, how many of you think, show of hands now, that we live in the most extraordinary time of change in the history of our species? Just how many of you think life is changing faster now than ever before? Scientists broadly agree with you. What's interesting is that to understand that fully, you have to imagine the life of an infant born today in rural China. The same day that Nelson Mandela passed away, sadly, a small girl born in rural China today will experience more change in her lifetime, quite likely, than any other human being that has ever lived on this planet. That's why innovation is important, and I'm going to talk about how you get innovation to work reliably and robustly, and why it's particularly important for Hong Kong to again lead all of China in the way and the degree and the intensity and the cadence at which it innovates. That's the sort of big topic I'm going to talk about today. To illustrate this idea that life is changing faster than ever before, let me just ask again for a show of hands. How many of you in the audience have ever played World of Warcraft, this famous game? Okay, dozens of you have. How many of you know that there's a teenager at a household near you that plays World of Warcraft? And dozens more. All right, so at any given moment, there are 6 to 11 million people playing World of Warcraft. And it's interesting to see what this means in practical terms. If you've played World of Warcraft, or if some small child at your home is playing World of Warcraft, perhaps even now while you're here at the convention center, what you will not perhaps know is that to survive in this game, it is normal and routine for the people in the game to organize themselves into what are called guilds. So the people that are surviving in this game, enjoying this game, playing this game, do a variety of things to design the kinds of logos that you see here, all to attract the best players in the world that play this game. And the reason that this is important, of course, is because the game is so huge, with 6 to 11 million people playing it at the same time, that no game in history has ever been like this before. There are more than 50 billion collective hours of people who have played this game over time. And to win at the game, to have a chance of even surviving at the game, somebody in your guild has to fund one of these enormous displays, like the Apple Cinema display, the one that is so big it deserves its own postal code, right? And the reason for that is that at any given moment, there are 20,000 advances in the state of play each and every day. 20,000 advances in the state of play every day. Imagine a world, ladies and gentlemen, where there are 20,000 advances in the state of play about how we would manage healthcare in China. 20,000 advances in the state of play every day and how we would build better financial systems and support for the people in this part of the world that are finding their standard of living constantly increasing. These are the important questions of design and innovation. We've heard a bunch of amazing presentations, lots of design work focused in places like Belgium, lots of principles we can learn from, like the really interesting presentation this morning that would focus on having cars that are self-driving and therefore can handle advertising all the time. This is one of the ways that we can get transportation in this part of the world in vehicles to be free for everybody that needs to use it and relatively low carbon impact. These are the kinds of questions that are crucial. And we can see examples already from gamification about how to think about this and why it matters in a really great deal. Now, why this is particularly surprising and interesting to me is illustrated by a mistake made by the game designers just last year. World of Warcraft is designed by a team from Blizzard Entertainment. And last year, in order to try to make the game more interesting, they introduced a special disease in the game, which they called corrupted blood virus. The disease was introduced to some monsters, and the idea was that if you were slaying the monsters with your sword or your weapons, and some of the monsters' blood sprayed on you, rather like modern Ebola, you would get infected with this disease called corrupted blood. This is the way the game might look, and if you defeat this monster up here and you catch corrupted blood, you're going to die. But the designers of the game made a mistake. The designers of the game forgot to program it so that the disease, once it affected you as a player, it didn't jump to all the members of your guild. And in a single afternoon, after they introduced this virus, they managed to wipe out 337 countries of people playing World of Warcraft. Now, why is that interesting to you and me? Because it turns out that in a region of the world constantly worried about the effects of viruses like SARS, we've never seen anything as critically important as this in determining the patterns of disease transmission, the vectors of disease amplification in a connected culture, and the ways in which human beings, as they learn about these diseases, learn to defend themselves from them. Again, nothing has ever been like this in history. It's faster, it's more digital, it's more interesting, and it's easier to study. Some of the very best infectious disease specialists and epidemiologists in the world have spent now over a year analyzing move by move, moment by moment, second by second, how this particular corrupted blood virus amplified through a digital environment. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a new era. We're in the 21st century. Hong Kong, as the gateway to China through much of the 20th century, has a chance to reinvent itself, has a chance to try to figure out what it means to be the leaders in innovation, and part of the world that's going to be innovating more than, faster than, and more profoundly than any other region in the world has ever done in such a short, compressed period of time. That's my invitation to you. Frankly, that's my expectation of you. And that is why I'm so excited and proud to be here at the Business of Design Week conference today. My message is simple, but important. Innovation is very different than people imagine it to be. It's not entirely about creativity, though creativity is always a plus. It's mostly about discipline. And learning to bring the discipline of innovation to the practices that we care about so much, to the problems that we have to encounter so thoroughly, so thoughtfully, and at such enormous scale. That's why this is important. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like you to understand is that we live in a moment where the stakes are high, time is short, the problems are real, they're complicated, and failure is not really an option. This is why I expect designers all over the world to be thought leaders in strategic thinking. This is why I expect designers all over the world to tackle the toughest, most important problems of the world and to solve them with courage and curiosity and extraordinary, extraordinary discipline. Now, to make the most of the very brief time we have together, about 30 minutes left, I've developed a sort of short presentation for you that's going to make 3 points. The first is that innovation comes in 10 distinct types. This is a discovery my colleagues and I made 19 years ago, but we've invested more than $6 million in understanding this discovery, and we have refreshed the analysis every other year for 19 straight years, and I'm going to share with you the latest discoveries we've made about this important phenomenon that we first were able to identify accidentally some time ago. The second topic I'm going to introduce for you today is the idea that what human beings want and need and value more than anything else is platforms instead of products. We live in an area of the world that constantly assumes that what human beings want is more products. It's not. And I'm going to give you the evidence about how to think about that and hopefully convince some of you in this audience to think about innovation in a richer, deeper way. The third and final thing that I want to illustrate is that some of the most important, most valuable innovations already in evidence in China think this way. It is not hard to think this way. You can all do it. Let's begin with this first topic, that innovation comes in 10 distinct types. To figure this out, we started 19 years ago by taking about 1,200 famous innovations that stretched over a 200-year period of history. And we stuck them in computers and we boiled them down to try to understand if they had anything in common with each other. Frankly, we didn't expect to get anything at all. And what we discovered, to our surprise, is that there is a great deal of recurring patterns and structures to the most valuable innovations that have ever occurred in history. And these are lessons we can all learn from, take to heart, and use as we try to do important and hard things going forward as design teams, okay? Now, all of this is part of an innovation effectiveness lab that my colleagues and I have run for 3 decades. By innovation effectiveness, what I mean is we try to get things to succeed instead of fail. And we have very careful metrics about what success means. If a company tries to contribute scarce resources to something it has never done before, success means that it returned the cost of capital. It made enough money off of whatever it tried to do to return the cost of capital. Now, here's some very depressing news. Research originally conducted by Doblin 14 years ago and confirmed just this year by Booz Allen Hamilton has discovered that innovation succeeds to returning the cost of capital a scant 4.5% of the time. That is across all industries and all geographies everywhere around the world. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the depressing news. And if you tackle innovation the way most people do, which is to take smart people, stick them in a room, and ask them to be creative, that's what you're going to get, by and large. And guess what? That's not good enough for the tough problems we now face. Problems where we have to house people and feed people, educate people, try to get them to be healthy, try to get them to have good financial habits, and try to get them to be as self-reliant as possible all through their lives. To get bigger success rates, guess what? It's not actually that hard. You mostly have to stop doing the things that are just plain stupid and ineffectual. If you stop doing the stuff that has no basis in science and start doing a small handful of things that actually make a huge difference, you can get into this success range very easily. It's not very hard to get above the all-important 50% success rate, so that every time we tackle something, even if it is hard, even if it is important, we're more likely to succeed than fail. When we have laboratory conditions with large-scale clients, our success rate can be as high as 82%. This, ladies and gentlemen, is prima facie evidence that innovation for the first time in the history of our species is giving up its secrets. We can learn to do it, we can do it on purpose, we can do it reliably, we can do it about important and hard things. That's the important news that I'm sharing with you today. But the problem is that most people look at innovation in a simplistic way. They don't see it as systemic, they don't see it as holistic, they don't really try to understand the entire problem, right? They just have some simplistic way of defining it, and they tackle that. What I expect of you, this incredibly important region, with so much design talent and so much strategic, emphasis on the value of thinking about a world that's changing more rapidly than ever before, I expect you to have a deeper take on innovation than this. Now, to understand this, we can lean on a very great thinker, Dr. Clay Christensen from the Harvard Business School, in work that he did about 12 years ago. He described 2 broad ambitions for innovation, although he didn't use these terms. What he said is that there's 2 ways that you can learn to innovate. One is to improve the known, and the other is to invent the new. Now, if you want to improve the known, the techniques to do that are taught in engineering and business schools. Had I want to be encyclopedic on this slide, I could have sneezed onto the screen 75 or 80 different methods that are well known about improving the known. Okay? But every once in a while, what you want to do instead is to swing for the fences, to do something the world has never asked you for, that never shows up in a focus group, that has the power to go on and change the world. When Clay Christensen was first thinking about this, he called the stuff at the top sustaining innovation and the stuff at the bottom sophisticated innovation. We renamed that, for a variety of technical reasons at Doblin, simple innovation at the top and sophisticated innovation at the bottom. Now, what distinguishes these 2 things is the number of types of innovation you're actually trying to use. If you're using 2 or 1, type of innovation, it's going to be simple innovation. And if you're using 3, 4, 5, 6, or more types of innovation, it's going to be sophisticated. Now, here's what you should know. In this part of the world, a part of the world that constantly lives on improving the known, you're in a good position to do very good successes over time, because 92 to 95% of all the innovations in the world need to be about steadily improving what we do. Figure out what we did last year and do those same things a little bit better, a little faster, a little cheaper. No one does that better than your region of the world. But for every 100 things that a company needs to try, a company that wants to be a leader in the world, what it should be trying to achieve is 5 to 8% of those initiatives should be about trying to change the world. Trying to do something to change a category, change the company, change a region. That's what creates a balanced portfolio. That's what creates a great success. Now, here's the punchline. We have never found any firm anywhere in the world that can successfully do both of these types of innovation or degrees of innovation with the same process. That suggests that we, smart professionals in the design field, need to be exceptionally conscious and strategic about which process we use for which kinds of tasks. Now, as it happens, I wrote a book about this, but you know, who doesn't? That is unusual in a couple of respects. The first thing is that I spent over $6 million on the research for the book. This is shockingly stupid, but I was paid a $40,000 advance, so I want you to know I'm a shrewd negotiator. The thing that's interesting about it is that we had Pentagram, a great design firm out of the UK, design it. We designed it from the beginning so that each and every page in the book is designed as a spread. So the book is designed to work as a book like this. The other thing that I insisted on, which the publisher really hated, was very heavy paper. Now, this makes it useful to you, because if you have, for instance, an insect problem in your home, and you own this book, and you whack the insect with this book, you're going to win, and the insect is going to lose. So it's designed to be a very useful book. It also works well if you needed to sort of cram it into a doorway that needed to be propped open, or if you have a window sill that's, you know, sort of slamming down. Will work to prop it open. So it's a very useful book, and that was, of course, our goal. To keep you from having to spend the money to buy the book, I've also posted for you on the same website a 2-page free summary of the book and its research, okay? But the heart of the book is, in fact, a great deal of research that teaches the world what we know now about how to get innovation to succeed instead of fail. Wiley, the publisher, tells me that it's on track to be the single most successful book they've ever published, and the Chinese edition, along with 6 other languages, is coming next year. So if you don't want to handle it in English, there will be a Chinese version available soon. So that's the book itself, but I want to try and take you through the critical pieces of the discoveries in the book. At the heart of it is this simple taxonomy of 10 types of innovation. This is what our research discovered, to our surprise, that reveals forever the nature of complicated and sophisticated innovations. And the simple point that I make to you is that once you know that these multiple types of innovation exist, it makes it much easier for you to do something sophisticated and hard, okay? Now, when we wrote about it and in the book, we specifically identified cliché examples from around the world, global companies that use one of those types of innovation very effectively. But what's also useful for you to know is that when you stick people in a room and ask them to innovate, they don't do this very well. Stick people in a room anywhere in the world, ask them to innovate with no training, and what they will do is come up with a new product idea. This, ladies and gentlemen, is exhausting. And it does not tend to produce successful results. Almost every good design team will also say, but wait, ours has a slightly better experience. Well, great. It will not survive for more than a few moments in brutal, difficult, heavily contested marketplaces unless it's better in some respect. But one of my co-authors, Brian Quinn, did a particularly elegant piece of analysis. We took 138 or 141 companies, depending on whether or not we had enough data for them, that are generally regarded as, by stock analysts around the world, as the best innovation firms in the world. Companies like Apple and Google and Pixar and firms like that. including several Chinese firms, and we analyzed them in terms of how they do innovation, and that was very, very revealing. To do this analysis, what we did is we fixed, on a comparable basis, how much they think about products. Think about that as indexed at 100. And then we asked, compared to everybody else in the world, how much do they think about the other types of innovation? And this is what's revealing. Compared to others in the world, the leading design firm or innovation-oriented firms in the world are using 4.5 times more business model innovation, 3 times more partnering innovation, 9 times more innovation in the way they use their own talent in their own firm. This is revealing, ladies and gentlemen. This is big news. If you want to do something that has the power to change the world, you want to get a smaller number of bigger ideas, not a larger number of little ideas. Brainstorming and the exercises we all go through to enhance our creativity tends almost always to produce a larger number of little ideas. But what the world wants us to produce, especially now, as I say, when the stakes are high, time is short, the problems are real, and failure is not an option, is a smaller number of bigger ideas. So how do we make sense of this? Well, one of the things that we discovered is that compared to a 5-year period, the firms that were excellent at innovation, again, according to the best analysts in the world, did in fact get a premium in the value of those firms globally. And the question is it due to innovation? Well, a company that runs innovation well probably runs many other things well too. So we didn't have isolation of variables, but we did something, again, that was analytically elegant. We took apart 138 companies according to the actual platforms that they're running. And we discovered that those that use 1 to 2 types of innovation did perform better than the S&P 500. That, by the way, is the George W. Bush Memorial Recession that he created globally for us all. There's the 3 to 4 types of innovation firms. You can see that they're doing much more innovation and get a better return on investment. And these are the firms that are doing 5 or more types of innovation for their principal platforms. This is exactly what I'm going to spend the remaining time that I have analyzing for you. I'm going to show you that there is a reason to make more sophisticated, more ambitious innovation efforts when it comes time to innovate. So here's the second basic point that I'm going to make, and it's quite simple. We mostly try to invent products when we get into brainstorming sessions, but that's not what human beings want. What they want is platforms. When I teach this, either at the Institute of Design in Chicago or at business schools around the world, including Kellogg Graduate School of Management, where I'm on the faculty, is that platforms matter. When I was a kid, that's what platforms consisted of, right? And for those of you trying to recognize them, those were the shoes worn by Elton John and the Madman Across the Water tour in 1974. You know, Leave On, Tiny Dancer? No, none of you know those songs. Okay, well, what's interesting is that since Elton John was doing these sort of songs on stage, many of the most valuable innovations in the history of the world have come along. And what's interesting about them is that they cut across geographies, they cut across industries, they cut across political boundaries. They've had the power to change the world, okay? And it's so fascinating to me once we learn to make this conscious and design them on purpose. So when I teach this, I have a complicated definition and a simple one. I'm going to treat you like professionals now, because most of you are. Most of you have the power to do complicated design programs. As a professional, here's what you need to know. If you want to create a platform, you need to make it an integrated offering that creates an experience where everything comes together, loosely controlled by the company that owns that platform. And wait, there's more. It usually has to be some kind of proprietary technologies under the covers so that you can protect it over time. It orchestrates a whole bunch of things that will come from many other companies, and over time that will tend to create an ecosystem of partners. Now notice that some of those words are in color. The reason for that is to remind you that they are distinct types of innovation. So if you want to create a platform, you want to use 5 or more types of innovation. And why would you want to do that? Because when you get it done, the promise you can make to the customers you're trying to serve is simplicity itself. the promise that you can make to the people you care about, the human beings whose lives we're trying to improve, is that a platform makes it easy for people to do things that were hard. Whether we're talking about Weibo or Google or the services that provide the products and the goods that we need instantly in this country the same day you order them, the fact that that's easy when it used to be hard is incredibly important to people. And this turns out to be valuable. Here, for instance, is a short list of the most popular consumer platforms in the world. Just out of curiosity, how many of you use at least 3 of these a day? Show of hands. Okay, that's the vast majority of the audience. The least valuable is worth $1 billion US, not Hong Kong dollars, $1 billion US. And here are the most valuable business-to-business platforms in the world. It's incredibly hard to escape these, ladies and gentlemen. You don't know when you're using them, but you're using every one of those every day as you go about your life. And the least valuable is worth $10 billion US. Learning to think in platforms is what we do to amplify value and to create a difference in the world. Companies that do this get heavily rewarded even if they don't do it on purpose. Google, 14 years ago, invented a search engine that behaved differently than any other search engine, and as you know, it went on to become the most valuable media company in the world. The day it launched 14 years ago, it was using 9 types of innovation. Great leaders, however, pay attention to how life is changing in the world that they're trying to operate. What Google engineers noticed 6 years ago is that the number of inquiries coming on their search service from computers was high and growing. Meanwhile, the number of inquiries coming from mobile telephones was small but growing much faster. And that's when they committed to a radical reinvention of their engineering so that it no longer just studied the World Wide Web, but whatever was nearest to the cell phone tower that you happen to be using. That was a radical reinvention of the company that they did with no fanfare and no announcement. And when they did it, they bought $2.2 billion worth of firms and added a 10th type of innovation. That's how great innovators think. That's how great innovators do their work. Many of you have had the experience of buying overpriced American coffee from Starbucks. What you may not know is that by providing free Wi-Fi, typically in this country for only 20 minutes, and the overpriced coffee, they're trying to do some things that give you an integrated experience. And by doing that, using 7 types of innovation, they've become a global brand for a commodity product, charging premium prices for a commodity product. But that's not why I'm telling you this. In Hong Kong, or pretty much anywhere else in the world, if you download their smart app for your smartphone, you can pay for your drink with your phone. And the reason that's interesting to me is that it turns out that 91 people are doing that every second. And at any given moment, Starbucks is now sitting on $2.2 billion worth of cash for people willing to prepay in advance for an overpriced cup of coffee. This is not obvious, ladies and gentlemen. Not only will I pay you too much for my cup of coffee, but I will gladly pay you today for a cup of coffee I will not drink until 2 weeks from Tuesday. That strikes me as an odd kind of thing, and interesting for all of us, right? And when they do that in the right ways, you agree to do it because you get a free cup of coffee on your birthday and things like that, free downloaded songs. This is an interesting one. How many of you have never heard of Live Ops as a firm? This is my way of illustrating to you that you can do 10 types of innovation in services, not just in product categories, okay? Live Ops is the world's largest call center. And get this, it has no call center. It does it mostly by employing elderly people around the world who need money and can work from their home. And it turns out to be the most sophisticated call center in the world because they can change the scripts faster than ever before. And in so doing, they're using so many types of innovation that they have radically altered the category. 9 types of innovation, in this case, have been enough to become the most successful, most agile, most sophisticated call center in the world with no technology that is proprietary at the core. Now let's take the technology that has built Hong Kong, that built Hong Kong into the global power center that it is, the containerized shipping industry, right? Before Hong Kong was the gateway to China, shipping was done by stevedores. A fisherman catches a boatload full of fish, and those fish had to be handled one at a time, throwing them from the ship to the dock, a very smelly, dangerous, difficult job. As you all know, the big innovation created originally by Sealand, a man in America trying to solve traffic jams in the northeast of the United States of America, accidentally created the shipping system that made for globalization that was done as brilliantly as is humanly possible right here in Hong Kong, steps from where we sit today. That breakthrough is radical and has led to all kinds of secondary and tertiary innovations, like people building data centers that you can drop onto the roof of this building with a helicopter in a ruggedized, very interesting way to get your data center delivered where you need it. Or beautiful homes built in New York City. Or, of course, leave it to the Italians to do something quite civilized and give us emergency infusions of espresso and cappuccino wherever we need it in a containerized shipping device, okay? But when we look at it from the lens of the types of innovation, what you should know is it was 7 types of innovation, and that was one of the things that made Hong Kong a global powerhouse. Everyone is interested in how Apple became the most valuable company in the world. Most people assume it's because of Steve Jobs and his leadership. It turns out not to be a very complete understanding of the case. What's interesting is that Steve and John Ivey created innovations in 4 hardware platforms: computers, pads, phones, and music players. But it all is orchestrated around something that Steve Jobs actively was opposed to: open applications, open software that would control all of those devices. When you look at it from that vantage point, looking at the iTunes Store in particular, what you discover is that there are 9 distinct types of innovation being used to create the world's most exotic experience ecosystem. And now that's how we all get music or lectures from boring professors or comedy shows and TV shows and movies and all kinds of things the world over. Now, China is already doing this, just not consciously. And I think it's such a privilege to talk to some of the best designers in the world, best designers in Asia, some of the best designers in Europe, all in this audience here at the Business of Design Week. I want to give you some sense of how this is already working and already sort of paying dividends right here in China. Now, full credit to the work of Dr. Victor Lowe and the rest of the team that lead the Polytechnic, right? This important debut coming in March of 2014 will put Hong Kong on the innovation and design map in a way that it never has been before now. I can't wait to be a chance to visit and teach there whenever I'm invited. It's an incredibly important and exciting frontier. But let's take a look at some of the things that China is already doing as well as anybody in the world. Using 3D printing techniques, one of the very important Peking University hospitals is already creating vertebrae implants in ways that no one in the world has ever done before. And when you look at it from the lens of types of innovation, it's 3 types. Now, to be fair, this is what we call a center-weighted pattern. That means it's mostly engineering and technical design. So that's an important advance, first in the world, using 3D printing to create surgical implants. That's exciting. One of the things we would expect is that there'll be a lot more work out here in the relatively near future. But let's look at some more examples to make sure we understand it. Tencent Holdings is creating a faster change in telephony than anybody in Asia, largely by focusing on online and mobile devices and their apps using 4 distinct types of innovation. It would be great if they added customer experience innovations over here on the right, but for the moment, they're out innovating everybody else using those 4 types of innovation. Particularly interested in this sort of dining out experience, that is so important in this region of the world and throughout China. More than 50 million reservations are being made a month using this service. Nothing was like it anywhere else in the world. An extraordinary platform that is growing fast and making a big difference, helping restaurants run themselves better and helping you and me get the reservations that we want and know that we'll get served at the places we want at the time we'd like to be served, okay? And of course, this one is critically important, the equivalent of Twitter in the United States, but Weibo is a critically important capability in this region of the world with 5 distinct types of innovation. Notice what's happening here is I'm specifically building up from a modest number of types of innovation to more and more types of innovation as I deconstruct some of the leading platforms now in use in different regions of China. Very impressive how Weibo has done this in a distinct and important way. And similarly, if we look at the ways in which innovation is being used to engage and serve customers, we can see that Jingdong is very aggressive in the way it's trying to innovate, using, in this particular case, 5 types of innovation as you see here. One of the critically important patterns to notice is that when you see all 3 colors, the blue, the orange, and the red, that's what we call a balanced innovation. And it's usually evidence that that is a big enough, profound enough innovation to enjoy an advantage that will last for a decade or more before people can have a chance of catching up and understanding what's happened. And then finally, it's a really interesting thing to look at Xiaomi in the way that it's trying to innovate in, again, the telephony sector. 6 types of innovation being used in this case. Interestingly enough, not focused on the product itself. Focused on things like the business model and the experience around the product, a pretty exciting shift compared to what would be normal and predictable. BGI is doing really interesting approaches to gene sequencing and complex life sciences discoveries. It's one of the most sophisticated innovations we're finding anywhere in China. 7 types of innovation, all 3 colors in evidence, one to watch, because this could end up changing the cost and the sophistication and the number of kinds of treatment for health conditions, agricultural conditions, and informatics anywhere throughout Asia. Now, using this same kind of ideas, ladies and gentlemen, I've worked with students to try to create breakthroughs. This is just one of hundreds of breakthroughs created this way, in this case by students in a business school, not a design school. My students working in Kellogg Graduate School of Management imagined that they would use the multiple types of innovation to reinvent train transportation in mainland China. Their concept is what they called the nonstop train. The way it would work is this little pod that you see on top of the train would be shaved off as a train went into or out of a platform where people wanted to stop. This part of the train keeps moving. That part of the train slows down ever so gently and then allows people to disembark, and other pods allow people to get on. So to leave the train, you climb out of your comfortable seat into this very temporary seat, and you're able to get off at whatever place you choose. Now, why is that important? Pretty simply because in the history of trains, every time somebody has built a train system anywhere in the world, every city along that route has gotten very wealthy. You create this kind of train system, and all of a sudden you can start to create entire communities devoted to health or entertainment or gambling or low-cost housing or retail shopping in a really radical, exciting, revolutionary way. My students did this in 10 weeks' time. Cracking this is a really important business plan and winning a business competition amongst 12 other student teams that worked very hard. All of this, ladies and gentlemen, is part of the Doblin Innovation System, which we will be teaching tomorrow at the IDK for 2 days. The kinds of things it's now allowing us to do is to diagnose innovation patterns for any firm in the world, any government in the world, any region in the world with disciplined diagnostic tools, and to create, as you see here, the kinds of breakthrough initiatives that those students did. This is the toolkit used by those students to create the nonstop moving train for China. What we've done is codified everything hard about creating a breakthrough innovation into 3 pages of questions that you have to answer in about a day. And when you do, you have a better than 50% chance of creating a breakthrough innovation with the power to change the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a time of extraordinary change. We live in a region of the world, or you do, that should, by rights, change the world faster than, deeper than, more profoundly than anything that the world has ever seen in any region of the world and any time in history. This is the magic moment we live in. This is the extraordinary opportunity that we have. We'll be teaching exactly these methods at the IDK workshop for the next 2 days. And beyond that, we will be posting all of those tools for anyone that needs them to be able to use them. This is how you get them. You go to clientweb.doblin.com, as you see here, and you will log in. It will ask you for an event code. It's BODW. It doesn't matter whether it's upper or lowercase. And that will get you my slides, the 2-page summary of the book, and an invitation that you will join with us to try to reinvent the world at exactly the moment it needs it. Let me leave you with one last thought. 57 years ago, George Bernard Shaw said something that's been really important to me ever since. He said, you know, God may have made this world, but that's no excuse for us not to make it better. The reason I love being in the design field, the reason I love being in the innovation field is that's our job. We're supposed to tackle the toughest problems in the world and make them better. Yes, we can make new artifacts. We can make washing machines and rice cookers and irons. But while we're at it, ladies and gentlemen, what say a small handful of us do the things we have to do to make the world a better place to live for the enormous number of citizens in this region of the world that are eager to have their lives be significantly better as soon as we can help them to do that. Thank you very much for the privilege of being with you today.
Thank you, Mr. Keeley, for most
my pleasure.
Inspirational talk.
Good.
Yeah. We have time for 2 questions, please. Yes, very enthusiastic. Hand raiser there.
Hi, I just want to ask if you've heard of Kickstarter, the one. So what do you think about that? Because it's like they keep on encouraging innovations.
It's a great question. Kickstarter is, for those of you that are not familiar with it, a new way to get capital for a concept that you're trying to develop without having to give away the equity of your business to bankers or to investors. Kickstarter is a very fast way to tell a story to perfect strangers. Initially, it was being used by people trying to create funded projects, usually in the arts. Increasingly, it's being used to create entirely new platform-level businesses. That concept that I showed you with the rapidly moving train came from a course where I was teaching Kickstarter and 50 other modern accelerants to make innovation cheaper than ever before, faster than ever before. I love Kickstarter, and one of the things that I will say to the designers in the room is that if you look at the most successful Kickstarter projects over the last 4 years, what's increasingly the case is that these are great ideas that have been developed into exciting narratives with the partnership of great design firms. So the designers turn out to be the ones that package the idea as a Kickstarter story. And in the best cases, the leading case in the world now has raised more than $10 million in less than a month for the Pebble watch to try to create it as a breakthrough business. All they were seeking, by the way, was $150,000. They accidentally raised a little over $10.2 million in less than 30 days. These are the kinds of things that are revolutionary. By the way, when we teach the workshop, I will teach not only Kickstarter, but 20 other major catalysts about how you can get research done in a fraction of the time that it used to take for just a small number of dollars, $50 as opposed to $35,000. How you can get complex coding done, how you can get cloud computing done, how you can get cloud research done in really interesting ways. So yes, it's a very exciting time for what we call lightweight innovation that's faster than ever before.
Thank you. Another question, please. Yep, the lady there.
Can I ask a question? Like, there's a Chinese saying, 过犹不及. Too much is just as bad as too little. So the more like invitation methods we use maybe lead us to too many troubles. Like I want to ask how many innovation ways are appropriate, like 10 or more or less?
I've got you. That's a very important question. So I agree with this Chinese phrase, which I'll never be able to pronounce as elegantly as you just did, but I appreciate you teaching it to me. As you know, there's a famous phrase in the design field, variously credited to Mies van der Rohe and a few others, called less is more. Part of the reason that I think your quote is so important is that I think the world is too filled with products, too filled with things that are in already heavily contested market spaces. The reason why I'm trying to help you to embrace multiple types of innovation is not because more is always better, but because smarter design is always better. And I'm trying to break the code of what it means to do more sophisticated, smarter design. Design that can handle the gnarly problems, the difficult problems of how we make people healthy or wealthy or educated effectively. Those problems are the biggest and most important problems of our time, and we as designers need to find the methods and the tools that allow us to challenge those problems adequately. Now, students are frequently coming to me and trying to show me how good they are by using all 10 types of innovation. And typically I tell them to lay down until the feeling goes away. The right answer is that you never need more than a few types of innovation, and the way you start is figuring out what's normal. Whatever you're reinventing, I don't care what it is, but start by understanding how many types of innovation are already being used in that category, and used one or two more. That's all you have to do. You don't always have to be shooting for the most ambitious possible innovation. It just makes it more costly and it makes it take too long. But you do need to be conscious as designers in trying to figure out what's normal now and how do we make something better than normal, because that's the nature of the problem we're trying to solve. It just makes you more powerful, it makes you more valuable, it makes you less decorative, it makes you more strategic, and it makes sure that government leaders and business leaders fully understand why they need your help. I think our mission, ladies and gentlemen, is to make design more influential, designers more powerful, and to do the things that design has always been trying to do, which is to change the world for the human beings that inhabit it. That's why it matters. Thank you very much.